sister's a therapist and I tell jokes. We both want to help all kinds of folks.
Hello, and welcome to My Sister's a Therapist. My name is Virginia Jones. I'm a stand-up comic, but my sister's a therapist.
Hello, my name is Laura Ryan. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. And my sister, Virginia, is a seasoned professional stand-up comedian.
Thank you. Here's something that I will tell the people for free. And this is something, it might not seem annoying to the outside world, but when you have a friend who has been doing stand-up comedy for 18 years, and they've invited you to a show and you can't go to the show, and that's fine. When you tell them good luck, that's aggravating.
That seems a little petty. I think
I feel that it is a universal among stand-ups, though. Perhaps the stand-up will let us know if they find it aggravating.
But I just feel like I'm saying, I hope the crowd goes well. I hope that the right people are in the audience. I hope all the lights work. I wish you luck. I want you to have good luck on your experience.
It's not a freaking talent show. I'm not doing a camp end of season skit. I've been doing it. Like whatever it is I do, I've been doing it.
There's so many things that could go wrong in that scenario that to wish someone good luck, I think is the right move. But apparently it's not. Have a great show. Break your leg.
Have a great show. That's great. Break a leg. Great. It was like if you said, oh, I've got a new client coming in on Tuesday. And I go, well, good luck.
Yeah, I probably need it. It's unpredictable. I have no idea what's coming in the door. Thank you. I need luck.
You're a better person than I am. What is our topic this week?
Our topic this week is nostalgia.
Something that we both truck heavily in.
Yes. According to one of our listeners, we exclusively talk about things from the 80s, which is probably not untrue. So, nostalgia. The meaning of nostalgia, of course, it came from Greek language. White people just have to make everything about the Greeks or the Romans.
Also, it ends in GIA, which is kind of a
given. It's a gimme. The gimme. Well, if you're interested or you care, it's a Greek compound consisting of nostos, meaning homecoming, and a Homeric word algos, meaning sorrow or despair. So homecoming, despair. Good stuff.
As Dylan Thomas once said, can never go home again, which then Morrissey quoted, and I thought Morrissey said it, but it wasn't. It was a poet.
Well, as we're discovering, most of the things we think that pop artists from the 80s and 90s said actually were stolen from somewhere else. The Homeric word algos, meaning sorrow or despair, was coined by a 17th century medical student to describe the anxieties displayed by Swiss mercenaries fighting away from home.
So like the homesickness in this case?
Yes, but it was considered a mental illness. In the 17th century, Swiss physician Dr. Johannes Hofer described nostalgia as a neurological disease of essentially demonic cause.
Oh, wow. So enjoying an aha song on the radio means I'm possessed.
The demons are afoot. You just know that. In the most scientific way, demons are coming for you.
I just saw this word used today in a way that made me laugh. My bestie from college is a Texan, and she's married to a Swedish man. And they just got a Long John Silver's where she lives. And she was so stoked to take her husband to enjoy this amazing food.
To get into the hush puppies.
And especially she liked the little fried bits of batter.
Broken pieces of fish. Yeah, at the bottom of every basket.
And when she asked him what he thought, he said, I think nostalgia is a powerful flavor additive.
I thought you were going to say, he said, Long Johannes Silver. So Hofer coined this term based on the German word Heimweh, which literally translates to homesickness. And soon it became a medical term to describe the sadness that Swiss mercenaries and soldiers felt during the Revolution and the Napoleonic Wars.
And you have to put yourself in these guys' shoes. When you were a soldier at that time, that was probably the only time you'd been away from home.
And there's no way to reconnect with your family, right? I was just letter writing, really. I mean, and who knows what the mail system was like back then. So the suffering was so bad that according to doctors at the time, armies infected with nostalgia would see soldiers suffer from acute insomnia, anorexia, and the desperate ongoing desire to return home. it's interesting to see it through that lens. So in many cases, soldiers would even succumb to nostalgia. According to Columbia University historian Thomas Dodman, as symptoms worsened, clinical depression set in, and because of a lack of hygiene and medicine, soldiers contracted diseases that killed them off.
Wow. So how would they treat nostalgia? Would you just get someone a teddy bear from home?
The only treatment was to send them home.
That's a pretty good way to get out of the army.
I'm suffering from acute nostalgia, also known as Schweizer-Krankheit, or the Swiss illness, because it was first identified in those Swiss mercenaries longing to go back home to their mountain homes. Nostalgia was considered a serious illness because there was little you could do to cure it. For soldiers, the only cure was to return home, not always possible, and definitely not possible as a quick solution. It was such a severe problem that by the 19th century, both mental health professionals and army doctors were researching the issue nonstop. Medical records from Civil War show that over 5,200 soldiers in the Union were diagnosed with nostalgia, and 58 succumbed to the disease.
Wow. And it is hard to put yourself in that time, because it's like, I was talking to probably you the other day, how different it is to date someone long distance now. But like when I was in college, you just wrote letters, and then later you had email. But like now, like between Insta and Facebook and TikTok and memes, like you could be in constant conversation with this person.
Yeah, it's a different game. I remember I had an LDR with somebody who lived in Great Britain. So it was really tricky because there was a big time difference. And, our work schedules didn't line up because of the time difference. And so I would we would email each other, and once a week we had a Skype call. And since his internet was so poor because he lived in Great Britain, it was just constantly getting logged off and just really bad visual, like I'm even looking at you right now. Like I could be in the room with you. I can see your whole face, and a lot of things have changed with LDRs.
Yeah. But like, imagine these dudes, and it's also that weird human tendency of like, wherever you travel, you try to find people who are from where you're from, or like British expats that in Texas who like find other British expats so they can just complain about how they can't find the biscuits they want.
It's having this culture, right? And I remember I was visiting Great Britain, and I met this guy from New Zealand. His name was Ewan the Plumber. He was talking about how he was in all these New Zealand groups. And I said, well, then why did you leave? Like, just stay in New Zealand if you want to hang out with people from New Zealand. And he said, and I said, well, why don't you just, walk around and find people? And he was like, yeah, you wouldn't know another American from a bar of soap. So his explanation, because we went to this really cool thing. I don't know if it's still around, but the Australians and New Zealanders every Sunday have basically a club night in an old warehouse with the straw and hay on the floor. And you go in this thing, and it's pitch black at 9 a.m. And it's just all Australian music for hours. And you're just dancing.
In Excess and Midnight Oil and the Saints and Nick Cave, Crowded House for the Kiwis.
So that was their way of avoiding the illness of nostalgia.
But yeah, think about these guys. Like, they had no one, probably from their home village with them, or, they had no way to talk to their families. They've gone from being like living your whole life in one place and then dropped into another place where life is not easy. And you have very little to comfort you in the way of the foods you like, the people you're used to, the music you like. You have nothing.
Yeah, you're reminding me of TikTok, because everything reminds me of a TikTok. But I did this deep dive on this man. He was an Italian native, and he came to America to make his way. And this was a really long time ago. And so he was from this little village. But like we talk about in the previous episode, he had synesthesia. He had photographic memories of places from his hometown. And so he would just, in New York City where he was living, he was working as a janitor, and he would just stay up all night making these paintings of his hometown. Actually, you know what? This was on a podcast. Now it's all coming back. So the podcaster goes back to the town and looks around, and it is exactly as he had it in his paintings, because his memory was so crisp of his hometown, and he never went home again. So over the next century, nostalgia changed from being called a disorder to becoming a repressive compulsive disorder, a form of depression, or simply mental frailty.
Wow. liking the place that you're from makes you
mentally frail. It wasn't until the late 20th century that nostalgia broke ties with homesickness, its original meaning, and gained this modern definition, a longing for the past, regardless of whether it relates to home or not.
If I may interject with a question, when that Kiwi said you wouldn't know another American from a bar of soap, what the heck did that mean?
What that meant was, if you were walking down the road, because I think I asked him too, what are you talking about? He said, if you were walking down the road and you saw an American, you wouldn't know that they were an American unless they identified themselves as such. So therefore, you have to go out to find other Americans. And I'm going to tell you, Ewan, I lived in the UK and I never sought out other Americans. I never missed Americans, and I was not concerned with talking to other Americans, although I did become very, very attached to Sex and the City. I rewatched all of them in the UK, and I got really into Frasier. It was so nice to hear my accent.
Right.
Because all day long, I had to listen to English people talking.
I don't mean to pile on this Kiwi, but you 100% can recognize other Americans when you see them.
It's true. They're usually wearing American flags on their shirts.
Or a shirt about a sports team.
If you close your eyes for a second, listen for the person who's speaking 2 to 3 decibels above everyone else, and that will be the American.
On a trip where I was visiting our sister, we went to a farmer's market, borough market, and there was an American woman explaining to the British lady at the shop, well, I can't take this soap in my carry-on because it's full and I'm leaving today and I won't be able to, can you not mail it to me? And making this complicated problem when the lady in the shop didn't give 2 craps if she bought the soap or didn't. And I'm like, that's America to me.
That's capitalism right there. That's an emphasis on capitalism, which people outside of America don't care about.
So, yeah, my experience of nostalgia is like a bittersweet feeling because it's the acknowledgement of time passing and of my own mortality. I don't find it to be depressing.
Right. Well, Merriam-Webster now calls it a wistful or excessively sentimental yearning for return to or of some past period or irrevocable condition, something that evokes nostalgia, also the state of being homesick.
So you were nostalgic for your home accent and watched television that was maybe not.
I was also nostalgic for ranch dressing. I really had a hard time not having access readily available to ranch dressing.
I can see why that would be true.
I was nostalgic for stores that stayed open past 5 p.m.
It's been a long time since I've lived in another country, but when I am in England, something I bitterly miss is decent Mexican food. My friend Jim moved to England a couple years ago, and he's someone I knew from LA, so we were making lunch plans, and he was like, we could go to a Mexican place. And I'm like, why would we do that?
If it's not on the border of Mexico, I'm not interested in eating Mexican food there.
That's a good rule.
Yeah. If it doesn't border Mexico, it's going to be garbage. It's going to be hot trash.
If it doesn't border Mexico, it's going to be borderline inedible.
Right. Well, and actually, our sister, Emily, and I went to Paris. That was the thing I missed. I missed ranch dressing, missed Tex-Mex. And so we went to, it was listed as a Mexican restaurant, but they got really confused in Paris about Native Americans and Mexican food. There was that Indian Harley. There was a motorcycle in there.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they were way off base. And I had a pretty, I would say mid, as the kids say. I had a pretty mid burrito. It was as good as I could get at the time.
My first trip to Berlin, we went to an American, everybody in Berlin was like, oh, you must go to this restaurant. You would like it so much. Their American restaurant was a 50s style diner, speaking of nostalgia. And so everything was like that sparkly vinyl banquet and a jukebox and just red, white, and black and burgers everywhere. I'm like, yeah, this is what it's like living in America.
I feel like that was the last time America was cool. So it makes sense to me why that would be highlighted. Actually, yeah, that reminds me of the Golden Bachelor. He went on his first date with the woman he ended up marrying. And they went to a 50s style diner. And I was thinking as I was watching them, I was like, this is so corny. But they were thinking, oh, this reminds me so much of being a young person. So circling back to the Australians, Narrative therapy was developed during the 1970s and 80s by Australian social worker Michael White and David Epstein of New Zealand. So we're also hitting the New Zealanders. These two fellows, Michael White and David Epstein, arrived at the conclusion that the way that our mental health works is related to the way that we see ourselves in our lifetime. So it's about the narrative that we tell about our own lives. So if I see myself as someone who is a winner, then I'm going to go through all of the experiences I've ever had in my life, and I'm going to sort of slough off the ones that don't make me look
that, right?
Yeah, don't align with that. And, in the inverse of that, if I see myself as a pathetic fool, I'm going to, in my mind, weed off any memories that make me not look or feel like a pathetic fool. So I think nostalgia ties into this too, because I think it's about how we view ourselves and what we think of ourselves.
Right. Confirmation bias. And yeah, it's interesting knowing our mom because especially like food stuff, she is very limited to the things that she ate growing up. Like things you don't even see anymore. You're like, where did you find canned green beans?
Right.
Everybody has stopped eating vegetables out of cans.
How'd you get your hands on some grape nuts? I didn't even know those were available for purchase anymore.
But on the topic of our mother and communication, it's really funny. I was talking to her and she was talking about like a line of people and she was like, and isn't that sad? They're all just staring at their phone. So I'm like, well, Mom, yeah, but they're probably interacting with their friends or experiencing music that they like. They're like, you're connecting with a whole little world in your phone. It's not just the phone.
Right. You're not just staring at a blank screen. You're going into other worlds, which, speaking of nostalgia, I find TikTok to be hilarious because the stuff that these kids are nostalgic about, I was in my mid 20s when it was happening. Yeah, I just find that they're really into Rugrats and stuff, SpongeBob. Because I'm like, you're supposed to be into He-Man and you're supposed to be into the Easy Bake Oven. You're supposed to be into Light Bright, Cabbage Patch Kids. This is what nostalgic people are supposed to be interested in. But I didn't realize that's actually just limited to people who were born in the time frame that I was born in.
Yeah, it's shocking how that works. What I like on TikTok is sometimes you'll find accounts. I haven't been on this side of TikTok lately, but accounts that are nostalgic for a time that they didn't live in. And
so
like the girl who just like has an 80s, like, so her room is 80s and she's got like the little cassette player that looked like it was part of a 1950s car kind of. And she's dressing 80s. She does her makeup very 80s, but the posters on her wall, like it's like a crazy person is living in the 80s because it's like things that would never go together. Like she's super into David Hasselhoff, Princess Diana, and then like Visage, the band. Like none of this
These
goes.
Things, John Bon Jovi and Boy George don't mix, madam.
That wouldn't be the same person, madam. She's just like collecting all this stuff from this period and putting it together in a way that makes sense to her.
She's like, oh, this is just old stuff. And all the old stuff goes together.
So you're talking about the television shows and toys that you should be nostalgic for. I find that being a thrift person and a vintage person, what really blindsides me is sometimes like you go to a thrift store and they're like, and this is 90s vintage. I'm like, well, that is not vintage. This is 2000s vintage. Well, that's 45 years ago.
That's something I still have in the bottom of a drawer.
Yeah, I still wear that. We're not doing the statement necklaces. What? Are you sure? We're not doing the thing where everything has like gold print on it and like is the print of a universe and there's a cat face. We're not doing that now.
That's not a thing anymore unless you're being nostalgic or you're trying to pretend that you're from a different time. And I remember when I was young, I went party that I remember thinking at the time was very lame because the party was a doo-wop party, so all the girls were wearing poodle skirts and stuff. And I was like, I am 12 years old. This is not it. And I realize now, like, that was the kid's parents. That was her parents' idea.
And like the 80s were obsessed with the 50s. The 70s and 80s were both kind of obsessed with the 50s. And then in the 90s, I was very obsessed with the 60s. Like it just kind of moves up one slot.
Yeah, I remember I dressed as a hippie for Halloween, which is so stupid.
Stupid. Who cares?
Speaking of lame, I think that might have been the same year. I was like, oh, I'm going to wear Like I wore your red long wig and I parted it down the middle and I like had like a peace sign t-shirt or something. Like, oh my gosh, that is cringe, as the kids say.
It is also funny to me as a fashion person to see a whole group of stuff be distilled down to one thing. So like going to the Halloween store, as I always do, and like all of 80s is now just like neon rubber bracelets and a side ponytail. Nothing else happens. There were no power suits.
It was just Debbie Gibson all the way.
I went to a party. I had gone to a friend's birthday party with a couple girlfriends. And then we got to the point where we had talked to everybody there. And I'm like, well, let's go. And there was another party in the building. And because we'd had a couple drinks, I'm like, well, let's just crash this party. And they were playing Gangster's Paradise. I'm like, I know this song. And then the next song they were playing, I also knew. And the next song I also knew. And then it was Delight. And I looked around and I'm like, there's no reason to play Groove is in the Heart.
It doesn't fit.
And then I noticed that everybody was wearing beanies. One, people were looking at us very strangely because they didn't know who the F we were. Everybody was wearing beanies and flannels. And I was at a 90s party and all the young people were trying to cosplay my youth. And it was very strange.
That sounds cringe as hell.
And I was the cringe.
I think I would just curl up and die right there. I think now this is it. Like, I'm done.
This is what you think. It's just all beanies and flannels. We also dressed in flips with flannel over it and big boots. So take that. Every sweater was made out of crochet for some reason.
Yeah, that was a look. I remember having this conversation as a young woman. I think I was, or maybe I was a ninth grader. I remember saying to a friend, well, the thing I like about now is like, this is just normal. Like we just look normal. This could fit into any time.
Right.
And it's not. It's not. No. If you watch one episode of Dawson's Creek, you'll realize that I was horribly mistaken.
And in the 90s, I was a goth. And I thought that I was a super 80s trad goth. Like you could just pick me up and put me in London. No one would know the difference. And I was so 90s. I had the tattoo, like the little tattoo necklace. I was wearing PVC trousers. It was the most 90s thing that could happen.
Right. And now everyone's looking back and saying those were the good old days. So I found this article in Psychology Today where they are remarking on a study done by David Newman at the University of Southern California. And the study was about nostalgia, and it yielded two key outcomes. The first finding was that people felt more nostalgic when they were with family and friends or when they were eating than they did when they were at work or school.
Definitely on family and friends. Like, yeah, when you meet someone who you've known a long time, you have to be aware that it does not just become remember when for 2 hours.
Right. So one possibility is that family, friends, and food all serve as what psychologists call retrieval cues. These are items in the current environment that trigger memories. So people can use retrieval cues intentionally, as for example, when they post a to-do list on the refrigerator door. But retrieval cues can also be unintentional. For instance, when a whiff of apple pie aroma reminds you of your grandmother.
What food is very nostalgic?
So I'm just thinking of one off the dome. This isn't a nostalgic childhood one, but when I was living in the UK, the meat replacement that I was eating at the time was Quorn, Quorn, and it was not available in America. And so it is mushroom based, but it has a very specific texture and flavor. And I remember I would cook Quorn in the kitchen and I would listen to Jazz FM. When Quorn came to America, like several years later, I remember cooking it and I took a bite and I listened to Jazz FM and I was like, I could close my eyes and time travel right now. It was so crazy. So what are some foods that trigger your nostalgia?
It's not good, but eating an uncooked Pop-Tart takes me back to my childhood, just like a cold strawberry Pop-Tart.
Yeah, a Nutri-Grain bar blueberry is also, that's a very sixth grade running for the bus kind of move. So yeah, according to the study, another possibility is that conversations with family and friends at meal times might include frequent mentions of past experiences together. Such discussions then would naturally lead to nostalgic reverie, either privately to oneself or as a shared emotion with the group. Yeah, I find meeting with my younger brother, pretty much most of the convos are random stuff on TV during our childhood. There was an infomercial that for some reason he and I watched like a lot. And it was about this machine that would put rhinestones on your clothes in the commercial or whatever. It's it's a long play show. It's like an hour or two long. This man walking around
dazzling the crap out of everything.
And he's talking to this woman who has recently bedazzled, I think, a denim jacket. He's admiring it. And he says, "This looks store-bought." So John Pierre and I often will call each other, "This looks store-bought." A second finding of this study was that people are more likely to experience nostalgia when they're feeling depressed than when they're in a happy mood. So I feel like a lot of times people are feeling sad and they want to feel happier. So basically what they're saying is it's homeopathic. Do you know the idea of homeopathic? You have a little bit of the illness to make you feel well. So in a similar vein, we take a flu medicine to reduce the severity of the symptoms, but it still doesn't restore us to our normal selves. Likewise, we should expect people to continue in their depressive state after engaging in nostalgic reverie. They still feel bad, just not as bad as they would have otherwise.
So you go to your doctor and you say, "I'm feeling really sad. I'm not enjoying my life at this moment. I wish I were in a better time." And the doctor says, "I prescribe 2 games of Dig Dug."
I was going to say, have you thought about watching an AHA video? And it's interesting because obviously the big hit Take On Me has been overplayed and overdone. But I found my record player broke for a long time, but I held on to my records. And then many, many years later, I got a record player again. And I started playing all my records. And I had all of your records, including the AHA albums. And it was interesting because it's almost like that isn't played regularly. You don't hear that anywhere. And so it was this weird little time capsule. And I immediately could close my eyes and be in my high school bedroom. So why do we long for the past? There's an article called that, The Science Behind Nostalgia. So delving into the neuroscience of nostalgia, researchers have discovered that this emotion triggers activity in several areas of the brain. These include the prefrontal cortex, responsible for planning and decision-making, the amygdala, which processes our emotions, the hippocampus, central to memory formation and recall, and the medial temporal lobes involved in processing sensory input and connecting it to our memories. When we feel nostalgic, these areas become particularly active, highlighting the intricate neurological dance behind our sentimental journeys to the past.
Speaking of neural pathways, I experienced this phenomenon when we all started doing iPods. And, I put every band I liked at the time on my iPod, and I would try to add new music. But all the music for your whole life is that you have every note memorized and you have very specific feelings about. When that goes up against something from this year, it's just like it's a losing battle. In order to stop from feeling like an old crone in my life, force myself to engage with new music just so I'm not going up to people and going, who's really good is The Cure.
I remembered a nostalgia food. So there was a Mr. Softy truck going through my neighborhood, which is a terrible name. One of the options was to make a root beer float, but to make it with Big Red. So my son had never had Big Red because he lived in my house. And that is hands off. He decided to give it a shot because, he's out in the wild. He can do what he wants. And I had a sip of the Big Red and it was wild how so many feelings and memories were connected to Big Red.
I haven't even seen a Big Red in probably 20 years.
I know that I haven't. It hasn't touched my lips. One of the things about nostalgia, a central aspect of nostalgia lies in the psychological concept of rosy retrospection. The cognitive bias makes us remember and recollect past events much more fondly and positively than they might have actually been. It's like wearing rose-tinted glasses when looking back at our past.
All the negative stuff gets turned down.
I found that very specific because I hadn't been single in such a long time. And I was remembering all the great nights that I met a cute boy at a dance club and made out with him and, the phone calls and the fun. And I realized that I had done, the thing that the Australians were talking about. And I'd created this narrative of singlehood being, just surrounded by friends and constantly having people around. But then when I was back in the trenches again, I realized, oh no, this was actually pretty horrible. And I have just cherry picked some of the best things. I forgot about all the times that I'm standing alone in a bar, staring at the walls, wondering when I can go home because my friends are making out with other people. I had neglected to remember that part.
You forgot the times of kind of being alone and lonely. You've forgotten the times of like waiting for a phone call that didn't come. Yeah, you just kind of gloss over those. Laura, I just went to answer the question, why haven't I seen Big Red in 20 years? Do you know why?
No.
It's distributed out of Austin, Texas. Is that just Southern?
It's specifically Austin based. I did not know that. I thought it was from Texas. I thought it was a Texas original. You need to get your lips around a glass. It's going to take you somewhere. So yeah, the reminiscence, the good old days, even when those days may have had their fair share of troubles, this phenomenon has been observed in various studies. In many instances, people remember past vacations, childhood experiences, and old relationships as being more joyful and less problematic than they had been in reality.
Why do you think that is?
Well, in the brain, this process involves selective memory retrieval, a fascinating mechanism where positive memories are more readily accessible than negative ones. This positive bias in recall contributes significantly to feelings of nostalgia. So neurologically, this could be attributed to the brain's reward pathways being triggered when recalling positive memories and reinforcing this experience of nostalgia.
It's really interesting. So like, no matter where you came from, no matter what you've experienced, the past always looks brighter than the present. Because you think, oh, we're nostalgic because we were young and we were learning a lot of stuff and like there was all this information coming our way. And that's true. But it's also that universally we look at things from the past as being better than things of now.
Right. It's called rosy retrospection. So it serves a crucial role in shaping our understanding and experience of nostalgia. And while it may introduce a certain level of bias in our memories, it also fosters a positive connection with our past. So in many ways, this rose-tinted view of our history helps us to navigate the present challenges. I think it just helps us to be more positive and optimistic about things.
Rosy Recollection, one of my good friends in college, that was her name. And we had a band called the Misnomers.
Rosy Recollection sounds like a lady who does the naked dances with the fans.
Does sound like a burlesque lady, but she also sounds like a lady who might sell cigarettes.
Yes, and she has a cute hat. One more shout out to narrative therapy. This is from the 19 best narrative therapy techniques. As a therapist or other mental health professional, your job in narrative therapy is to help your client find their voice and tell their story in their own words. According to the philosophy behind narrative therapy, storytelling is how we make meaning and find purpose in our own experience. I think that's what a lot of this is about. It's about making meaning out of our experiences. It wasn't just the Big Red or the Bedazzler. It was what it meant about my life. It was what it meant about who I was at the time, and what it meant about my family and all of that good stuff.
The storytelling and kind of like framing your experiences and memories is, I think, one of the big human desires.
And that's why I like what Michael White and David Epstein did with narrative therapy, because I look at it as kind of choose my own adventure. I get to think about my life in whatever way I choose. The reason I take so many photographs and edit them so heavily is that I want to remember things as better than they were, because I want to think about my life in a positive way. So, Virginia, what are your takeaways from this episode about nostalgia?
I think it's very interesting that nostalgia, the concept of nostalgia, originated as a mental disease, because I've always thought of it as a kind of a positive thing. Like maybe it's a little silly, but nostalgia makes me feel good, like bittersweet but good, a little bit wistful. So I find it very interesting that it was something that could kill you.
It was a potentially deadly illness.
And I'm also glad that I learned that Big Red is from Austin.
You haven't just been actively avoiding it for the last 20 years.
Right. Laura, what are your final thoughts on this episode?
My final thoughts are, don't let nostalgia get you down, because I think that the mistake that we make is we make negative comparisons between this rose-tinted past and our present experience. It's never going to look as good as the past. I would say, I really love the idea of narrative therapy, and I really love the idea of actively taking part in creating the narrative about who you are as a person and making it look better, feel better, sound better, so that you can have a better experience while you're here on this planet.
It's interesting to frame it as you need to keep in mind that your present is probably just the same balance of good and bad as your past and your future, that we're not coming from a wonderful place and going to a terrible place. We're just coming from different places.
Right. And if you look at depression, depression is about focusing on the past. In order to avoid depression, I would recommend strongly focusing on the present. And if you are nostalgic, try to make it work for you. Think about happy memories and think about what was present at that time that is still present. What can I continue with? If Big Red made me happy, maybe I could drink it again. It turned out, in my case, it did not make me happy. It was way too sweet. And my son thought it was disgusting and he couldn't believe that I ever drank it.
Laura, do you have a listener review to share with us this week?
I do, in fact. This week's review is from Kevin Murphy Law. So thank you in advance, Kevin Murphy Law. Shout out to Kevin Murphy Law. I'm still laughing about Batman and his diagnosis. It feels like maybe therapy would be better than wearing a rubber suit and beating up random thugs in back alleys. We're not here to kink shame, right? Great perspectives on life and comedy generally. I'm a middle-aged white guy, so I clearly know everything about podcasts, and you should listen to this one. Thank you, Kevin. So, Virginia, if people want to reach out to the show, how would they do that? How would they email us, for example?
Well, if you want to email us ideas, compliments, we don't really want complaints, but anything else you can send us at hello@mysistersatherapist.com. If you want to hire us, we are available for speaking engagements, retreats,
wellness events, women's seminars,
events, any kind of women's seminars. You can write us at hire@mysistersatherapist.com. Laura, where can people find you specifically?
If they want to find me specifically, they can go to my website, lauraryan.org, or if you're interested in Instagram, you can find the show at My Sister's a Therapist Instagram account. And if you want to find me on TikTok, you can look out for I Am Laura Ryan, where mostly I talk about this podcast. Virginia, where can people find you on the interwebs?
Thank you for asking. You can find me at Badinia, Badinia. You should be able to find that word by Googling my name, Virginia Jones. Spent a lot of money on SEO so that happens. I'm Badinia on TikTok. I would love for you to follow my TikTok. I'm Badinia on Instagram. It's my everything. It's a nonsense word that means everything and nothing at all. And in closing, we would like to remind everyone of the immortal words of Billy Ray Valentine Capricorn. We can make it, baby.
Me and you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.